Good evening and welcome. My name is Rob Carter and I'm the president of the Addison County Chamber of Commerce. In partnership with the Addison County Economic Development Corporation, I'm pleased to welcome you to tonight's Addison County Legislative Candidate Forum for the Middlebury area. The Addison District State Senate candidates, as well as the House candidates for Addison 1, Addison 2, and Addison-Rutland, have gathered here to speak on a wide range of issues and topics of greatest interest to voters in our community. Many thanks go to our media sponsor, the Addison Independent. And in a moment, I'll introduce our moderator, but first a word from Sarah Audette, the Chamber's Event and Tourism Manager. Sarah?
Great, thank you, Rob. I have a few housekeeping items. First, the questions that our moderator will be posing this evening have been determined in advance based on input we gathered through a community survey. We are anticipating that we will have time toward the end of the forum to invite questions from the audience. If you would like to submit a question, you may do so at any point during the forum by clicking the Q&A button and typing in your query. Please identify your name and town of residence. The moderator will pose as many audience questions as time allows at the end. Second, we will be sharing a screen to display a timer to the candidates. For our audience members at home who would like to see all of the candidates, you can escape out of full screen mode, set your display to gallery view, and then make the timer screen smaller. In case you run into any issues with your audio, I will post call-in information to the chat. And finally, I will note that tonight's forum is being recorded. The recording will be posted to the Chamber of Commerce website at addisoncounty.com by the end of the week. Now back to Rob.
Great, thanks. Now it's my pleasure to introduce this evening's moderator, Don Devost, who is a resident and business owner in Middlebury. Don?
Thank you, Rob, and thank you to the candidates and citizens virtually gathered here this evening. I'm going to start by sharing the guidelines. Candidates will have 1 minute to respond to each question. Every candidate will have the opportunity for one 30-second rebuttal, which they can use at any time during the forum. If there is time at the end of the forum, we will accept questions from the audience. Candidates will also have 1 minute to make an opening and closing statement. We are screen sharing a timer, although I don't know if that's true. If we're screen sharing a timer, the candidates will know how much time they have. If not, then certainly I will let them know when their 1 minute is up. And so I'd like to begin with candidate introductions, 1 minute each, please. And we'll start with the Senate candidates and then the House candidates, all in alphabetical order. So we'll be starting with Chris Bray.
Good evening. My name is Senator Chris Bray. I want to thank the Chamber for hosting this event. A strong democracy depends on good information, so thank you for hosting this. I want to start by addressing two fundamental questions. Why have I chosen to serve in the legislature and why am I running for re-election? And for me, it begins with my family. My parents instilled in all their children the idea that your role in life includes giving back to community through service. And I've been engaged in community service since I was a kid. As a teenager, I volunteered at the local hospital. In college, I was a counselor and rescue squad member. When my kids entered school, I became a reading and writing enrichment coach. And when my kids played sports, I became a coach and referee. I went on to fire and rescue, United Way Board, land trust, trustee of UVM. And for 12 years, I've had the honor of representing you as a citizen legislature, 4 in this House and 8 in the Senate. I would like to serve, continue to serve in that capacity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up is Peter Briggs.
Good evening, I'm Peter Briggs, local farmer here in Addison. I'm running again because I'm very concerned about the problems we're going to be seeing in our state in the future, not the least of which one that concerns me is the teacher's pension fund, which I'm beginning to believe, there's no doubt in my mind that it's going to end in bankruptcy. It's getting bigger and we don't have the means to pay for it. We can't be taking this kind of economic hit with a shutdown to one of our main industries like tourism and not see large budget deficits or gaps, however you want to call them. And usually the way Montpelier has responded in the past has been raising taxes, which is quite a strain on the working class and lower classes of Vermonters. So I see this next session as being important. We take real serious looks at what are going to be our priorities that we spend on, because there isn't going to be enough to go around. We can't spend our way out of this.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Next up, Jon Christiano.
John, you need to unmute.
Okay, found it. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. I'm running in this election in hopes to provide a balance in the legislature, because I feel that a cooperative attitude between the two parties, which we don't have now, in my opinion, is essential to a healthy, happy populace. I'm concerned about the environment. I'm very concerned about the GWSA, and I'm anxious to work with other parties in the legislature and in the public to try and resolve those in a manner that's satisfactory to all concerned parties.
Okay, thank you. Archie Flower.
Good evening. My name is Archie Flower. I'm running for state senate, and I am trying to bring a message of libertarianism, which is sorely needed, because we have a legislature and we have a government filled with officials top to bottom that want to centralize everything in Montpelier. And libertarianism is, I believe, what Vermont is all about in its roots. It's about decentralization. We have a strong tradition of town meetings. Our Constitution in Article 6 states that all power being originally inherent in and consequently derived from the people, all officers of government, whether legislative or executive, are their trustees and servants, and at all times in a legal way accountable to them. I believe Montpelier needs to be reminded of this fact. Thank you.
Thank you. Ruth Hardy.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you to the chamber, moderator, other candidates, and members of the public who are here tonight. My name is Ruth Hardy. For the past 2 years, I've had the honor of being one of 2 state senators representing the Addison district in the Vermont State Senate. I serve on the Senate Education and Agriculture committees, so a large focus of my work has been on schools and farms. I've worked to make schools more equitable and safe, and I've worked to make farms more prosperous and sustainable. During the COVID crisis, my focus has been on ensuring that my constituents have the information necessary to stay safe and secure. I have provided regular public updates and helped my constituents access state services and resources so they can be healthy and financially stable. I have also advocated for a safe reopening of Vermont that emphasizes strong public health protocols and public safety first. As a mother of 3 kids and a daughter of an elderly mother, I know the past 6 months have been extremely stressful for families throughout Vermont. I have worked tirelessly to help families make it through. I'm proud of my work in the Senate and look forward to discussing my record tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Robin Scheu.
Hello, I'm Robin Scheu from Middlebury, and along with Amy Sheldon, I represent Middlebury and East Middlebury in the Vermont House. I was first elected in 2016, and I'm running to represent you for a 3rd term. In my first term, I served on the House Corrections and Institutions Committee, and in this most recent term, I moved over to House Ways and Means, which deals with all matters relating to the revenues of the state. I'm also a member of the Climate Solutions Caucus and the Women's Caucus. I bring a wide range of experience and community service to my work as a legislator. I was a banker for 15 years. I ran the Economic Development Corporation for 9, was the interim executive director at both the Middlebury Area Land Trust and the Solid Waste District. Local board experience includes being chair of the United Way Board and the Mary Hogan School Board. And I also spent several years at the Porter Medical Center Board, and I'm currently treasurer of the Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund Board. I lived in Middlebury for over 28 years. My husband Ted and I have raised our children here. I've been pleased and honored to serve as one of your representatives and look forward to doing so again in January.
Thank you. Amy Sheldon.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and thanks for hosting this event. I'm Amy Sheldon, and I represent Middlebury in the Vermont House, and I'm running for my 4th term in the legislature. I currently chair the Natural Resources, Fish and Wildlife Committee. I previously served on the Commerce and Economic Development Committee and the Ag Committee, as well as serving on the Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules, which is a joint oversight committee in the legislature. Locally, I serve on the Middlebury Conservation Commission and the board of the Climate Economy Action Center of Addison County. Outside of my legislative responsibilities, I am a natural resource planner at my own company, which focuses on conservation and restoration projects. It's been my great honor to represent Middlebury in the Vermont House for the past 6 years, and I hope I can continue serving my community in this manner.
Thank you. We will now move to Peter Conlon.
Thank you, and good evening, and thank you to the Chamber for organizing this in a difficult year to have a traditional campaign. My name is Peter Conlon. I live in Cornwall. I've been here for 30 years, and I currently represent in the House Cornwall, Goshen, Hancock, Leicester, Ripon, and Salisbury. You're going to hear a lot of us talk about what an honor it is to serve in the legislature, and it's not a throwaway line. It truly is, and I think probably never more so than in the past 6 months. Whatever challenges Vermont had before the pandemic hit have only been amplified. And I think that what we need is a strong legislature going forward to continue to focus on these problems. Many of the inequities in the state were certainly unmasked by this. And I would just like the honor and privilege to continue working on making an equitable and a Vermont that really works for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. And now our final candidate, Ruth Shattuck Bernstein.
Hello, and thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm very excited to run to represent my communities. I'm also a newbie and got in on this process late when I replaced a candidate who had to withdraw, so bear with me. I've lived in Addison County my whole life, born and raised in Lincoln and Bristol, lived in Middlebury, attended St. Michael's College, some on campus, but mostly commuting from Shoreham, where I've been raising my 3 children for the last 14 years. I've also worked as a school teacher, school librarian, town librarian, and in local social service agencies. I served on the Shoreham School Board when we still had one and actively fought against Act 46 school district consolidation, which was a hard road and required a lot of bravery. But it meant everything for me to know that I stood up for what I felt was right and best for me and my constituents. I'm still fighting for Shoreham School and others because I feel our town-based system of education and government is something truly great about Vermont, and will set ourselves up for the best future if we support the things that make Vermont unique.
Thank you very much. So each of our candidates has had a chance to introduce themselves. So we'll be moving now to the questions. And the first question will be addressed to candidates in a different order. We'll be mixing that up. So the question will first go to Peter Conlon, and this is the question. Because of the pandemic, more Addison County residents have been working and learning from home, underscoring the need for faster internet speeds and more equitable access to broadband. What is your plan to address this need?
Yes, I think that's one of the many things that have been exposed by the pandemic is the uneven broadband across the state. One of the real challenges we have is that broadband is not something the state can regulate under federal law. So it leaves the state with some difficult, or with few tools to use. One of them is financial incentives to get the companies that currently offer broadband to improve and expand. But the other, and probably the newest and most effective one, is the creation of communication union districts. We're hearing a lot about that from many of our rural towns, which allows them to band together and use some of the tools that a municipality has for bonding in order to create essentially private, but a public-private broadband system that can bring better levels of service. It's been shown in other parts of the state, and hopefully it'll be a success here in Addison County as well.
Thank you. This question now goes to Ruth Shattuck Bernstein.
The question was about broadband. Broadband it seems to be a topic that everybody, no matter what their party, seems to be able to get behind. So even when I've been reaching out to local, the farm community has really emphasized that broadband is something that really needs to be strengthened. We've seen it when we're doing our remote schooling with our kids and businesses, and that's what I have to say.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we turn to Robin Scheu.
Thanks. I think Peter covered a lot of what I would probably say, and he talked about the communication union districts, and I believe that actually parts of Middlebury may be involved in one as well. It's surprising where we don't have connectivity. We got over $1.2 billion in coronavirus relief funds from the federal government, and we spent nearly 30 million of it on connectivity. A lot of it went to the Department of Public Service. We gave over $17 million for accelerated broadband connectivity program, including Wi-Fi hotspots. That's kind of the biggest one that we did. We've expanded broadband to telehealth, which has been another interesting place. But we clearly need more, and we've seen as people have been fleeing other states due to the pandemic and coming to Vermont that broadband is a critical thing. Federal funds are going to have to be a big part of it, but I think we all agree that it's a really important piece of what we need here in Vermont for the economy and for people. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Amy Sheldon.
Yeah, thanks a lot. We do all agree that connectivity is key to the future of our vibrant economy, particularly the rural areas. I was on the Commerce Committee when we created the CUD enabling statute. So it's great to see those kind of popping up and taking place. Robin covered the numbers, as I always expect her to do for me. She's the numbers person. We did manage to get additional funding. We had base funding in there, and then we got additional funding through the CFR. And I think it's actually we talked, like the schools were really revealed during the COVID, the inequities in our access to broadband. Some kids couldn't even go to school, and that really brought the need home. But the other group that we haven't talked about is folks with medical needs that were unable to get to a doctor, and having access through telemedicine is key. But other than that, I think Peter and Robin have covered it well, and I think we're on a good path toward increasing connectivity in Vermont.
Thank you very much. And now we'll hear from Jon Christiano.
Okay, thank you. I guess my thoughts on this area center on existing infrastructure that we already have and on expanding that. We need more cell towers, especially in the more remote areas. It's difficult to get a good signal often, but there are areas or farm silos and things like that that could be additional cell towers erected there. If we could increase the power output of the existing facilities, I think that would help a lot to get greater coverage, because and maybe hold the companies responsible a little bit more. I live in an area where one of the providers has it listed as extremely good coverage, but unless we hang out a window of our house, we don't get very good coverage. So I think those are some areas that we can work on that would be relatively straightforward and simple, but effective.
Thank you very much. Peter Briggs.
I see it as a two-part problem. Number one, getting it out to everybody, which my answer to that would be getting together with experts and making that happen. The private sector is the one with the brains to make this happen. But also, once we get it up, we've got to make sure that it stays up. The internet is becoming more and more a part of everybody's everyday life. And if that was taken out by either a terrorist attack or a foreign country trying to cripple us, right now it would be very successful in slowing down life, in the future only more so. So we also got to make sure it's protected as well. And I hear experts say that we're quite vulnerable to attack from malicious players.
Okay, thank you. Chris Bray.
Thanks. These days, a broadband connection is essential to modern living, as when we introduced electricity into Vermont back in the 30s. And I think the state should regard, and we all have a right to regard, it as a fundamental resource we all need access to. I served on the Vermont Telecommunications Authority and helped write the state communications plan that is aiming to get us to 100 megabits down and up speed. We have a long way to go to get there. Worked with Senator McDonald and in government operations to write the Communication Union District Law, and partnered with the House to pass that along. One of the reasons I'm mentioning these names is because I'd say there is a culture of cooperation in the State House. And we do a lot of work together in this delegation. So I'm giving a shout out to all my colleagues who are here on the screen today. Thank you.
Thank you. And the question now goes to Archie Flower.
Thank you, Don. Broadband is definitely a good thing. It's key to the information age. We're right at the beginning of the information age, and you know, you can have the whole library of human knowledge in your hands if you have a smartphone, but if you don't have the broadband, the library isn't going to be there. But I do believe that bringing that to people should be left to the free market, because when you decentralize that and when you have competition, that incentivizes companies to build out the necessary infrastructure, and they tend to do it in manners that will be more efficient and end up serving more people with better quality.
Thank you very much. And the final candidate to answer this question is Ruth Hardy.
Thank you. A lot of what I would have said has already been said by my colleagues in the legislature. As Representative Scheu said, we put $30.2 million of the coronavirus relief funds into technology and internet connectivity. And that did enable many people to get line extensions to their house, including full blocks of people who applied together. So this is a great thing. Unfortunately, we're not able to put a lot of that money into solid infrastructure because we must spend that money before the end of December. However, I do want to give a big shout out to our schools that worked tirelessly to get internet connectivity to students through hotspots and delivery of computers to all students. Our schools did yeoman's work to make sure that our students were connected as much as possible during the remote learning, and continue to do so at this point. So great job, schools, in this area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So unless any candidate wants to offer a rebuttal to this question, we'll move on to the next question. So while the first question was about broadband connectivity, something everyone can get behind, the next question addresses an issue that's been a little bit more divisive. And the question is this: the Addison Central School District is considering consolidating its 7 elementary schools into 3 or 4 schools. Do you support school consolidation? And if so, why? If not, why not? And the order of questions starts with Peter Briggs.
Thank you, and I'm on the Addison Select Board, in which we're currently dealing with this issue in our town. So I just want to make clear that this is my own opinion, and I'm not speaking on behalf of the board. No, I do not support consolidation of schools. I believe more options, the better. Our country has done better than a lot of others because we've given everybody as much options as possible. And frankly, the bigger and the more solid you make the school system, the more resistant it is to change. And as Archie said, we are in the beginning of the information age. I sincerely believe that probably in the next 20 years, we're going to find that parents are going to be leaving the public education system in droves, because computer learning will be so much more versatile, more responsive to their individual child. Just what they're doing with things like blockchain, it's incredible what we're going to see in the future. And I don't think we've begun to see anything yet.
Thank you very much. The question now goes to Jon Christiano.
I am in favor of school consolidations. I think it's a good idea. And the related services that they offer as well. Where I do have a problem with school consolidation is there was at least an implied impression that there'd be a reduction in the staffing in the schools that were being closed. And in particular, I think that should mean a prorated reduction in administrative staff. And I don't think that means, in the public's eye, moving administrators from one closed facility to a now centralized facility for the same or more money. There's no savings that I can see in that, or reduced savings.
Okay, thank you very much. Ruth Hardy.
Thank you. So this is an issue, as you stated, that the ACSD school board and other local school boards are tackling, and really the decision on how to coordinate and how to configure local schools is up to local school districts and local voters. It's not an issue that would be taken up in the Vermont legislature. However, when I was on a school board, I worked very hard to, as the chair of the ACSD Charter Committee, to configure our schools and merge our school boards. Over the next several years, school districts are going to face increasing financial pressures, facility issues, and educational equity issues. And so all of these things will need to be taken into consideration as school districts and school boards determine the best configuration for each of their school boards. In some cases, it may be merging. In some cases, it would keep the current configuration. And that is a local decision.
Okay, thank you very much. And now Archie Flower.
Thank you, Don. I would have to say that if there's anything more vital to our society or more vital to civilization itself, it's education. I can't think of anything more vital than that. I would have to say, though, again, decentralization. I think that trying to consolidate is just going to go against Vermont values. I believe that having a school is the heart of a community, and if you take that away, you're basically going to end up killing that community, and I think that's a tragedy. I believe that in terms of public schools, we should have more options. We should have schools in as many places as we can, and I also believe that homeschooling and privatization of schooling is going to be a much bigger thing in the future.
Okay, thank you very much. Chris Bray.
In a democratic society, schools are the greatest creators of opportunity. We live in a fast-changing global economy, and we need to offer Vermonters a world-class education. When we talk about school size, I think we need to distinguish between the size of the physical buildings and the size of the associated administration. We can have numerous small schools operating under a consolidated administrative structure, and this can reduce administrative costs and facilitate the sharing of resources so that even our smaller schools can have stronger, broader programs with art, music, and foreign languages. We have an opportunity to further reduce administrative costs and sharing resources by doing things like having remote learning, so that perhaps the best physics teacher in the state offers AP physics to schools around the state. But in the end, the ultimate driver for making decisions about how we run our schools must be equality, to provide the best possible education to every student.
Thank you. The question goes to Ruth Shattuck Bernstein.
All right, so this is obviously something that's very personal and important to me. I've been fighting for our town schools for 6 years. I think towns with schools at the heart are the building blocks of life in Vermont, and it is with great peril that we abandon that system. When people are, if they have a choice where they're going to live, it's often based on whether a school's there. My partner and I have built 4 houses in Shoreham, and we want to build more, relatively low-cost houses. But not appealing to build in a town without a school. I'm a product of our education system, and I've worked in the education system. I think we need to tackle the high costs in other ways, such as prioritizing classroom teachers over higher level administrators and specialists, and looking at our property tax system and reforming it. I think our towns and schools should be supported more strongly.
Okay, thank you. Peter Conlon.
Thanks, and I should also open with a disclaimer that I am a member of the ACSD board, but what I'm going to say really reflects only my own views. Now, the fact is you know, nobody likes the idea of consolidating or closing schools. But the fact is that the demographics of Vermont have changed, and changed in ways that have created real financial challenges for school systems in order to provide equitable education for all of the students. But it's also changed it in ways that as the number of students has diminished, the ability to provide a robust education for all of our students has become more and more challenging. Part of that is cost, but part of that is just simply school and class size. You know, in a perfect world, we would return to population levels that supported robust educational programs in all of our towns, but that's just not the reality we're working under currently.
Thank you very much. Amy Sheldon.
Thank you. I believe public education is the foundation of our democracy. We need to be sure that all children have access to learning opportunities that will set them up for success as both engaged citizens and productive members of society. I think as legislators, we can work to bring equity to both quality and access for all students. When we're making decisions about school consolidation, I think it's most important to remember to put the students first, and remember that they deserve access to quality educational resources. I voted in support of Act 46 in order to bring these conversations to light and make sure that all of our students did have that access. I think we need to give it time to work. It's really just starting out. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, this question goes to Robin Scheu.
Thanks. I'm going to probably echo some of what some of my legislative colleagues have already said, maybe with a few different words. If people believe in local control, which most Vermonters do, then decisions about maintaining or consolidating schools should be left up to local communities and school districts who know best what they need. But that said, I also believe it's paramount that all students have access to a quality education, no matter where they live. And that's been a challenge. With declining enrollment, each year school districts are having to cut back on programs, maintenance, et cetera, in order to keep costs down. So I really worry that students who struggle will be left further behind, and not all children will have access to equal learning opportunities. I think local school districts need to proactively engage and listen to all voices, including community members who aren't typically at the table. And any decisions that are made must balance what is best for our children, which is critical, with what taxpayers can afford. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And it looks like we might have a rebuttal. Ruth, Shattuck, Bernstein.
Well, I just wanted to mention, first off, we talk about declining enrollment all the time, but it's not always true. Shoreham's gone up 40% in the last 6 years. I don't have all the numbers for everywhere, but we see people moving in, valuing our small schools and our small towns more. So I think that's really important. I feel like we're getting cut off at the knees right when we're doing exactly what the state says they want us to do, attracting families, having people stay and have their kids. And also, I feel that students who struggle get lost in the bigger schools, and what benefits the town, benefits the families, benefits the students. It's all an ecosystem that can be healthier together.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else? Okay, there appear to be no further rebuttals. Moving to question 3. The population of Vermont has been decreasing, and the median age in our state is 5 years higher than the national average. What impact has this had on Vermont? And what should the state do to encourage young Vermonters to stay here and inspire others to move here? And we will start with Ruth Shattuck Bernstein.
Oh gosh, so I just said what I think is most important: strengthening our towns, making it a great place for us to want to raise our kids, build houses, start businesses. and I think of myself as hopefully, potentially, possibly the next generation up in Montpelier, representing this generation in a turning point, and really engaging those younger than me. I think it's so important that we value what is really great about Vermont, not just the schools, but our local farms, our local businesses, our environment, and really focus on building up the things that make us unique and special instead of trying to be something that we're not.
Okay, thank you very much. Question goes to Amy Sheldon.
Thank you. I thought that was a great answer. I could have, that's exactly where I go with this. You know, Vermont's uniqueness has set us apart during the pandemic, and our future policies and investments need to focus on sustaining our small rural character while modernizing the infrastructure that we've all agreed to, that we need. I think building a climate economy and having a vibrant economic sector there will also bring us a just transition away from fossil fuels. But it'll also enliven our economic vibrancy and appeal to folks who are feeling the effects of both climate and the pandemic. I think food production is key. The pandemic has magnified the need for a local resilient food production, and we're like Vermont is well situated to do all of the things that we need to face the uncertainties of the future. So I think we need to keep doing more of the same that makes us unique.
Thank you very much. Peter Conlon.
Thanks. I think that Ruth's point about Vermont trying to be something that we're not was right on the money. You know, we aren't a state that can offer lots of millions of dollars in financial incentives to big companies to relocate here. But what we need to do is highlight the best of what we have, which is our quality of life. And I think we also need to think very seriously about two, what I would call pro-business aspects, but are really quality of life aspects as well. And that is having high quality childcare that's affordable and to have affordable health care. I think these are two things that go a long way to attracting people, keeping people. And we need to nurture those businesses that start here in Vermont and are growing, as opposed to spending the millions that sometimes we do when we're held a little bit as ransom for bigger companies threatening to leave or looking to move here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the question goes to Robin Scheu.
Thank you. And I'm going to just continue the list of things, I guess, that that Amy and Peter have talked about. I had some of the same ones on my list. We already talked about connectivity, and that's really important. The pandemic has highlighted people wanting to come to Vermont, and if they can't find a place that they love that has internet, that's a problem. Also, housing, both available housing and housing that people can afford and that they want is really important. I know of people who have taken jobs here and couldn't find a house and moved off to some other state, so that's really important. I had childcare on my list, that's critical. Also, a statewide paid family and medical leave program would be an economic development boon. Costing less and attracting young people who want to have families and raise their children here. I think that's really important as well. And ongoing support for entrepreneurial businesses so people know that they're welcome here. And I would say that people of all races and colors are welcome here too. We need to be doing more of that publicly.
Thank you very much. Peter Briggs.
It's my understanding that actually right now a lot of people are moving here from down country. It's kind of like 9/11 all over again. So I'll reserve comment about how we're going to get people here until we see how many of them stay and whether or not we go back into this declining trend of population again. But a lot of people who've moved out of here, number one reason why they cite is they can't afford property taxes. So dealing with that would be a significant contributor to getting people here, keeping businesses here, getting businesses here. And one other thing that makes a new home relatively expensive is also trying to get a state-certified septic system installed, which can be as much as a car. So that's very hard for people who are starting to buy a house, probably also have college debt and other things. So probably it's time we revisit our 20-year-old sewer laws.
Thank you. Chris Bray.
There is only one Vermont. And when we celebrate our unique strengths, when we pull together, we position ourselves for our strongest, best economic future. Even in the midst of COVID, which has been a profound challenge that Vermont is managing well, we've seen and continue to see that we can grow our economy in terms of food, agriculture, energy, and outdoor recreation. Through the Farm to Plate program I started a decade ago, Vermont has grown more diverse and sustainable in food and agriculture. In a similar way, I've worked with others on the clean energy economy, which is creating good paying jobs in renewable energy, weatherization, and efficiency. The Trails Bill my committee just supported is helping our outdoor recreation industry. So overall, we've seen 26,000 new jobs, 842 new businesses, over 110 million and more farm gate revenues. So I'm supporting a stronger economy that brings people to Vermont to celebrate the unique strengths we have.
Thank you. This question goes to Jon Christiano.
Okay, well, I see one of the largest aspects of this is trying to stop the exodus out of Vermont. It is a beautiful place to live. It has a lot of very positive attributes. Perhaps if we could get our heads together collectively and increase incentives for people to stay in Vermont. One of the ways to do that is to offer better jobs. I think a lot of our young people would benefit from the establishment of trade schools, maybe a break away from the major universities and some of those facilities, and again go to better jobs, higher paying jobs. It would enable them to stay here, because I know I have two sons that both left the state of Vermont for better jobs, one in Massachusetts and one in Carolina. So if we want them to stay, we got to find a way to pay.
Thank you very much. Ruth Hardy.
Thank you. I think my legislative colleagues have covered many of the things that I would have said. I do think there's not one single answer to this question. It's really about a complete policy package. And playing to our strengths is incredibly important. I would echo a lot of what Representative Scheu said, including childcare, paid family leave, broadband, housing. All of these things are important to young Vermonters. As a mother of 3 teenagers, I talk to them a lot about what they would want to be able to stay here and raise their own families. And a couple things that haven't been mentioned is one, affordable college. I have worked really hard as a member of the Senate Education Committee to be able to provide college scholarships to students to attend our state colleges and community colleges. Also, as Representative Scheu mentioned, diversity. This is an incredibly important thing for young people, to have a diverse population. And finally also to address climate change. So those are 3 things that I would put at the top of my list. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the final candidate to answer this question is Archie Flower.
Thank you, Don. I have to point out that Senator Bray's background, as well as mine, point out the beauty of Vermont, and we all love Vermont's environment. That's one reason to stay here, but there are too many reasons to leave, and one of the biggest is the economy in the form of property taxes and not having enough proper jobs, well-paying jobs. We can solve many of the problems already mentioned, including climate change and jobs, by bringing in a new industry, high-tech industry, liquid fluoride thorium reactors. We can set that up. That can address climate change. It can bring in new youth and, no pun intended, truly energize the economy.
Thank you very much. I don't see anyone offering a rebuttal, so we will move to question 4. And this question concerns the economy. The coronavirus pandemic has had a significant impact on Vermont's economy. The unemployment rate is hovering around 5%, which is low relative to the rest of the nation, but actually nearly double the rate that unemployment was heading into the pandemic. Tourism, manufacturing, and construction are the hardest hit industries. Families are paying more for childcare and struggling to pay for housing and to put food on the table. What is your plan for helping Vermont's economy and its people to recover through the duration of the pandemic and beyond? And the first candidate to receive this question is Jon Christiano.
Good. Not an easy question in the best of times, but I think in general, not only the state, but we as individuals need to reduce our expenses. How do we do that? By cutting back on some of our expectations, some of the things that we spend money frivolously on. I think it's important that families work together to share their expenses and reduce them. I'm honestly, and this will not go over well, I'm not a big proponent of two-worker families. I think that's driven by the need for a lot of things that we oftentimes don't need.
Thank you for your answer. Archie Flower.
Jon Christiano did certainly hit the nail on the head when he said this isn't an easy question in normal times. Dealing with the SARS-CoV-2 virus and the ensuing social and economic impacts has definitely been on everyone's mind. And I think that the real trick here is education of what this virus means and how to keep ourselves safe, how to keep our neighbors safe. And by doing that, we'll be able to open up sooner by having that knowledge. And by being able to open up, we'll be able to start the economy back up.
Thank you very much. Ruth Hardy.
Thank you. I think first and foremost, in order for our economy to recover, we need to make sure that we focus on the true recovery from this pandemic. We need to continue along the path that we've been having here in Vermont with addressing the COVID crisis responsibly from the position of a public health perspective. And we need to make sure that the rest of the country follows our lead because, as you said, we are a tourist-driven state, and if we can't recover, then our economy can't recover. I have worked tirelessly to connect many of my constituents to the resources that are necessary to recover, including unemployment insurance, health care and child care, and all the assistance they need to make sure that their families can survive during this pandemic. And I think being able to spend our state and federal resources wisely is important, and we have done so in the legislature. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chris Bray.
Thanks. I want to start with reiterating what I said in an earlier answer. You know, with farm to plate and our clean energy economy, we've grown 26,000 jobs in the last decade while I've been serving. So there is an opportunity for healthy economic growth that supports both the economy and the environment. They go hand in hand, in fact, in Vermont. That is one of our strong suits. If I'm reelected, one of the things I want to continue to work on is creating an all fuels energy efficiency program, which will help us double down and do more of the same kind of work we've done to help save Vermonters using Efficiency Vermont, a program in which for every dollar we've invested, we're saving 4. And it's reduced emissions so much that it's the equivalent of having taken 240,000 cars off the road for a decade. So there is a win-win formula here, and it's economy plus environment.
Thank you. Peter Briggs.
From the beginning, I was thinking that such a heavy-handed lockdown was a bit out of step with our rural state. South Dakota is rural, a lot like our state. They did not engage in a heavy-handed lockdown. They did not issue government orders, and they did not have significant spikes. As far as economic recovery, I don't see full recovery. There's a lot of sectors of industry that are not going to come back, and it's not going to be back to where it was for a very long time. I'm very saddened by the fact that so many business owners have had their God-given right to engage in commerce stepped on by the government, and they've lost their entire life's work. And I don't see any easy way out of this, as I said. I do believe the state's going to end up in bankruptcy over the teachers' pension fund, and we're not coming back anytime soon. We're going to have to make some serious decisions about what we are prioritizing for spending in Montpelier. Because just raising taxes to try to cover it is going to exacerbate the problem.
Thank you very much. Robin Scheu.
Sure, thank you. So we've done a lot of things right. And I believe in this pandemic, that Governor Scott making the decision to shut down quickly has really, as Senator Hardy said, really reduced the problem, and we have actually been the envy of the nation, using his words. We were lucky that we got the second highest amount of federal dollars with $1.25 billion, the most per capita except for Wyoming, who had the same amount, but they have fewer people. This is an epidemiological problem. It's not a typical economic problem. So it's not going to end by traditional economic forces, but rather by the course of the pandemic. So everything we can do to take care of people now is important. We didn't use our reserves. We built up our reserves during bad times, and that's made a huge difference. And I think that will help see us well going forward.
Thank you very much. Peter Conlon.
Thanks. You mentioned that Vermont is doing better than most states, probably all states. And it's really predominantly for two main reasons. One is, as my colleagues have pointed out, $1.25 billion from the federal government that has really gone a long way to helping keep many of our businesses afloat. That's not a sustainable path, of course, but this is really a national problem that needs to be solved in a national way. Vermont doesn't have the resources to keep everybody afloat. But really, the recovery will be based on suppressing the virus. And we have the most inexpensive economic development tool around. It's called a mask. It's clearly shown incredible results in Vermont. It's lovely to see downtown Middlebury open again with people in it, and seeing them all in masks gives us all more confidence to get out and keep the economy moving on an upward trajectory. Thanks.
Thank you. Amy Sheldon.
Yeah, thank you. A plan for economic recovery in 60 seconds. I would say that one of the things we've learned during the COVID is to sort of work in real time and respond to the uncertainty of it. And we've done a really great job of that as a state and in the legislature. We're going to have huge budget challenges when we go back in just 3 months. And we haven't talked about this, but we just adjourned on Friday. So many of us are still just transitioning back into our regular jobs and lives. I know that it is a national problem, and I know that our congressional delegation is working hard to continue to find funds to help us with a recovery plan. And I think we're just going to have to keep responding to what comes along and doubling down on our efforts to end the virus.
Thank you. And finally, the question goes to Ruth Shattuck Bernstein.
I think that we need to, as everybody has mostly said, continue our state-led science-based recovery, opening all sectors of the state as quickly and safely as possible, especially hospitality and in-person education, which we're moving towards. I do think a silver lining from this pandemic has been an increased appreciation for our local goods and institutions, even tourism within the state. And we need to build up on that and grow that kind of momentum. I would I think measures that really help connect producers, large and small, with consumers, local producers, large and small, with local consumers, individuals, as well as like public and private, like schools, ways that we can just make those connections stronger and easier. Increased broadband, of course, underlies all economic development, town development, and healthcare reform.
Okay, thank you. We'll be moving on to question 5. In addition to the coronavirus pandemic, our world is also experiencing the largest civil rights movement in history, which in turn has prompted conversations around how policing functions in our community and how police departments get funded. What is your current thinking on these issues? And we start with Amy Sheldon.
Undoubtedly, we have a problem with racism in this country and in Vermont. I believe strongly that every person has a right to equal protection under the law, and that we need to continue to shine a light on implicit and bias and explicit racism. This session, we've passed 3 really important bills to address racism in our state government. We passed a Justice Reinvestment Act, which focuses on how criminals are treated within the system on furlough and parole and substance abuse. We passed a bill that requires the Department of Corrections to plan to address and change systemic racism. And we also passed another bill on police oversight and misconduct. Many of these require ongoing communication and work with the legislature. So we're going to continue to make this a priority and address the issue in the state.
Thank you very much. Ruth Shattuck Bernstein.
So systemic bias, racism is, of course, a problem and a symptom in lots of aspects of our lives, including police. And I certainly support as much social service being embedded in police departments and support in that manner. And I think a lot of this is also another aspect is education. And I hate how this is a hot button divisive issue that people take sides and demonize each other. I think if we really listen, we actually agree for the most part. And there's got to be a better way than having so much vitriol here.
Thank you very much. Peter Conlon.
Thank you. Obviously, a very big topic. You know, one thing that a lot of the unrest and the events of the past have shown us is that we need to take a hard look at our police practices. If you talk to police in Vermont who have been paired with social workers to respond to domestic disturbances and whatnot, they'll tell you that it is an excellent program. And it needs to be expanded, but that's not a replacement for the police. It is an augmentation to the police. I think that the two go hand in hand. And I think that, you know, we all have an individual responsibility to consider our own implicit biases. And as we do, we'll become more aware of those that are around us, including in how we deal with the criminal justice system. Thanks.
Thank you. The question goes to Robin Scheu.
Don, my screen froze and I did not hear the question. I have a general idea, but I'd like to know what the question actually was, please.
Sure, I'm happy to repeat it. So in addition to the coronavirus pandemic, our world is also experiencing what is arguably the largest civil rights movement in history, which in turn has prompted conversations around how policing functions in our community and how police departments get funded. What is your current thinking on these issues?
Okay, thank you. I did hear some of my colleagues' answer of Amy's answer, so she's actually addressed some of the bills that we talked about, so I won't repeat that, but I think it's really important to keep in mind that the concepts of racial equity and racial justice aren't just about individual people, but really importantly about racially inequitable structures. You know, we've had decades of redlining, the policies about what law enforcement can and cannot do, we haven't spent a lot of time considering racial inequity. I think what Representative Conlon talked about with embedding mental health workers and social workers. I know from talking to Vermont State police officers who have been on calls with such people, it's made a huge difference. I think the more we can work collaboratively and use all of the social services together and think about community policing, the better. And I'm really proud of what the town of Middlebury is doing by taking this seriously and reaching out to others and doing some personal reflection. So I'm pleased to see that things are happening there. Thanks.
Thank you. Chris Bray.
As a member of Senate Government Operations, I've worked to help hire, empower, and fund the Director of Racial Equity and her team, in the state. And as the events have highlighted this year, all the more clearly, we can't just aspire to be non-racist. We have to rise to a higher level, to become anti-racist, by which I mean actively identifying and overcoming the systemic racism that consistently leads to higher rates of poverty and injustice for Americans who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color. This year, we focused on laying the foundations of broader, longer-term program through collecting statistically reliable and revealing data so that when we come back, we can reform operations at the state and municipal level, as well as our schools and other areas where we regulate outside of schools. I'd say one last quick note. We ask our schools and police departments today to take on many more responsibilities than we used to. It's a big change. We need to support them.
Thank you. The question goes to Archie Flower.
So in terms of systemic racism, one of the biggest problems is the militarization of police and the setting of police against citizenry in terms of there's a conflict there because many people feel that when you have victimless crimes, the police are out to get you, but since no one's getting hurt, the citizens don't feel the need to tell police. But if police weren't trying to get you for pot or get you for other drugs, if they were only concentrating on violent crimes like murder or rape, then they would have the full support of the citizenry. We need to end the war on drugs. That's the single biggest systemic part of this, and it would make the police and citizenry come together again in terms of common cause.
Thank you very much. Ruth Hardy.
Thank you. Again, my legislative colleagues have covered much of what I would have said. Representative Sheldon mentioned the incredibly important legislation that we passed this year regarding criminal justice oversight and racism. And Senator Bray is correct that we need to make sure that we are not only not racist, but that we are anti-racist and that we denounce white supremacy. I have worked really hard to take a look at this issue from every aspect of the legislative process, not just policing, but also education. I worked on a bill about ethnic diversity in our schools and also through our healthcare system as well. And finally, one thing that hasn't been mentioned is listening to and including the voices and leaders of color in our system. We are a very white state, but we have many leaders of color who need to be lifted up and listened to and brought into this conversation much more inclusively. Thank you.
Thank you. We now ask the question of Jon Christiano.
Okay, thank you. This is very difficult for me because I don't have any legislative colleagues, and most of the participants so far have not addressed any of the things that are concerns of mine. One of them is the definition of equal protection. When an elderly person can go into town shopping, minding your own business, sitting in a restaurant and be attacked by a bunch of BLM thugs, that's not equal protection by any definition I'm aware of. Racism, I lived here a long time. I'm not a racist. I don't really know anyone that is. I'm not witness to it. And then systemic racism means that a group of people systematically set out to enhance that. I don't believe that either. And then there's a little thing of government speech, where some group can paint something on a sidewalk in Mount Peter, but another group who petitions the city cannot, under protection of government speech, a concept that I've never heard of before and I think is ridiculous. We're the government.
Thank you for your answer. And the final candidate to answer this question is Peter Briggs.
Back in 1776, America put forward the radical idea that all men are created equal, and a lot of white men spilled their blood for that. There were blacks and Indians that contributed, but the lion's share was paid for by white men. And then we had the Civil War that determined that all men meant all men. And again, there were blacks that contributed, but a lot of it was paid for by white men. I think America has a very good record of moving in the right direction on extending equality under the law. Police are a vital part of a civilized society. As somebody who's a farmer knows, there's a lot of people out there who think they can farm better than I can. I don't have the arrogance to tell police that I know how to police better than they do. I have some concerns, but I am not going to advocate for radical changes until we know exactly what police are going through. It's a job I don't want, so therefore I'm going to be slow to criticize.
Thank you very much. And now we'll be moving on to question number 6. Let's Grow Kids has released a report in January of this year showing that more than half of infants and toddlers in Addison County do not have access to any regulated childcare programs. What is your plan for increasing the number of regulated childcare slots available in our community? And how will you ensure that those slots are high quality and affordable to families? And the first candidate to answer this question is Archie Flower.
This would go back to the economy, because when you have too many households with both parents trying to work, that puts pressure on the child care system as a whole. And so if we have a more robust economy, then we can have a more robust child care system, because those who are not working at a normal job can definitely put in the work to help their neighbors with their children. And I believe that Vermonters are that type of people that absolutely do want to give a helping hand when they have the time to do so.
Thank you very much. Chris Bray.
Thank you. One of the challenges for our county, as you pointed out, is a lack of childcare spots. And there are a couple of ways that we can approach this, one of which actually brings together two problems and treats them as an opportunity. And that is for pre-K and younger, when we have schools that have increasing amounts of space available because the traditional student population is declining, there's also an opportunity to use those spaces with appropriate renovation, et cetera, to make them age appropriate, to bring kids to these same centers and make them more broadly supportive of Vermonters with young children. As the COVID pandemic has revealed to all of us, although the primary purpose of schools is education, we've also come to appreciate how many children being in school allow their parents to work.
Thank you. Jon Christiano.
Okay, this is another difficult one for me, because I'm a great individual for being responsible for your own self and your own actions. I believe that young children especially, their most formative years should be spent with and formed with their biological parents whenever possible, not someone else. Again, it's an opportunity or for people to work 2 jobs so they could have more things, a lot of times things that they don't need. And their primary, in my opinion, responsibility is to their children and not me for their children.
Okay, thank you. Question goes to Ruth Hardy.
Thank you. This is an issue that is very close to my heart as a mother of 3 children, and it's not one that has gotten significantly better since my children were infants and toddlers. One of the issues is that this is primarily a workforce issue. Early childhood educators are underpaid and do not generally have benefits, so increasing the pay and the benefit for childcare providers would go a long way. Also increasing the subsidies for families of children, infants and toddlers, so that childcare is more affordable for families. In FY19, we invested $5.2 million in our childcare system, and that went a long way. And during the COVID crisis, we have led the nation in supporting our childcare system, but so much more needs to be done. As we embark on our next budget, I hope we can address paid family leave and the technology deficit for the childcare system in order to better approach this issue. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Peter Briggs.
I'm not particularly in favor of free childcare or free college, because anything that has a $0 value has just that. It's not very valuable. Quality comes at a price. We did have more affordable and more childcare about 4 years ago. Within the last 4 years, Montpelier passed a lot of regulations that put a lot of childcare entities out. Reversing a lot of those laws would make a significant difference there. Also, again, since the 50s, the workforce has been doubling because more and more homes have become 2-person incomes. And if 2 people want to work out of a home, that's fine. But remember, supply and demand still applies. The more workers there are, the less people have to pay for them. So that's part of the problem as well.
Okay, thank you. Amy Sheldon.
Yeah, thanks. Addressing our childcare needs is certainly part of the demographic challenge that we discussed earlier and needs to be part of our economic development plan. It's important, like COVID has magnified the weaknesses in our economy, and it's revealed that many of our essential workers are also our most low-wage workers, and it's making us take a long, hard look at that, and Senator Hardy articulated that well. We need to pay people more who are doing the most valuable work in our communities, and what's more valuable than taking care of our children. So I know we've made a lot of progress in funding for childcare, but I think also supporting a livable wage for all of our essential workers, and sort of raising the tide for all the boats is one of the best solutions we can come to.
Okay, thank you. Peter Conlon.
Thank you. Infant and toddler care is certainly a major challenge. It's not cheap to provide, and it's hard to charge parents really what it's worth because it becomes unaffordable. I think it can't be solved without the help of government. That can be a local option as well. If we look just down the road in Whiting, we have in this case, an empty school building that was then turned over really at no cost to a private child care center, greatly expanding the amount of infant and toddler care slots in the area. But we also need to look at what the state can do. And our current child care subsidy program really isn't probably expansive enough to folks who are struggling to afford child care or in the rates it pays to the child care provider, so that they can do so at a reasonable cost. And I will echo my other candidates here that we need to take another look at the regulations that came into being and see really what does it take to provide quality infant and toddler care. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ruth Shattuck Bernstein.
All right, so yeah, this is a very important issue to me. I currently have a 2-year-old. There is no registered childcare in my town of Shoreham currently. I drive to Addison for her to attend there. I do know they were, of course, the best intentions, the regulations that were passed, but a lot of local childcares went out of business because of that. So somehow we need our regulations to encourage and support our childcares. I agree, we need our early childhood educators. Their pay, benefits, and even the respect that they receive really needs to be elevated. Yeah, the hubs that were set up recently to cover school-age children, maybe there's a way to transition some of that to infant and toddler and preschool care and encourage nonprofits in this arena.
Okay, thank you. And finally, the question goes to Robin Scheu.
Thank you. I will be mostly echoing what others have said. In fact, I had written down the Whiting School, and that Representative Conlon talked about it before I got there. And so there are spaces in empty schools that we can use. But this real issue of how do we pay professional staff that we desperately need livable wages and benefits that they deserve and they should be getting, and parents who aren't making much money often, but who can't afford to pay what's happening. It's a real paradox that we're dealing with. And as Senator Hardy said, it is a workforce issue. I think government does have to get involved. I also wonder if groups of businesses in certain areas, like in the industrial park in Middlebury on Exchange Street, could get together and have some sort of a daycare center there so people could bring their kids to school. If we do more collaboration and group work, we might be able to help be a piece of the solution, but it's going to take a lot of players to make it all work.
Okay, thank you very much. So we now move to the last forum question before we start taking questions from the audience. If you would like to submit a question, please send it in via the Q&A button. Please identify your name and town of residence when you submit the question. And so here is the final forum question. The Vermont legislature recently passed the Global Warming Solutions Act, requiring Vermont to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions by 40% below 1990 levels by 2030. The bill also establishes a climate council to recommend solutions for achieving that goal. If you were a member of the Climate Council, what solutions would you propose to the other council members? And the first person to answer this question will be Robin Scheu.
Okay, so Scott put together another council before the Global Warming Solutions Act was passed. And they came up with 50 different suggestions. And so the first thing I would do is look at that. That was a group of people who got together and made recommendations. And so I would start by prioritizing some of those things. People talk about electric vehicles. That's really important. We know that transportation and heating are the two biggest culprits when it comes to fossil fuel emissions in the state of Vermont. So I would want to see more money go to weatherization. We have very old housing stock in this state, and more to electric vehicles, whether they are individual cars and trucks to school buses and things like that. So I think there's a few things that we can do, but I'd start with the 50 suggestions from the original council.
Thank you very much. Amy Sheldon.
Thank you. That's a great idea Robin had, but I was busy writing down my thoughts. Regenerative agriculture and carbon sequestration in our forests. In my time in the legislature, I've spent a lot of time focused on protecting our forest resources and encouraging passing legislation to have towns plan for protection of our forests, as well as recently with the Act 250 work we're doing that will help protect our forests. So our forests are invaluable in the conversation around our carbon impact. Continuing to invest in the electrification of our transportation system. We need to ramp that up significantly so that it's affordable for more people to have electric vehicles, and also continuing to invest heavily in our renewable energy sector. Those are the paths that I would take immediately.
Thank you very much. Peter Conlon.
You know, the purpose of creating the Climate Council was to really bring together experts in the field and scientists and government officials who know a lot more about this than I do. And I think that that's really important to remember when we talk about the Global Warming Solutions Act. But if the question is what ways would I see us being able to achieve our goals, I think we're developing a big list just listening to people speak tonight. Dollar for dollar weatherization as a clear bang for the buck. We do have an old housing stock. The money that's invested in our housing stock not only pays dividends for global warming, but it pays dividends for having housing available toward the future. Electric vehicles is clearly an emerging technology that has the potential to have a significant impact on climate across the globe, and we need to continue to pursue that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. The question goes to Ruth Shattuck Bernstein.
All right, so a healthy environment is foundational for our way of life here. Our climate, lakes, rivers, forests, open lands all need protections which allow for healthy and sustainable industry and development. I don't think the goals are in opposition to each other. In the towns that I seek to represent, agriculture has been and continues to be a leading industry, and I really think my priority would be getting industry insiders to be part of creating the solutions that work for all of us. The green economy, outdoor economies are economic drivers that need to be responsibly encouraged. Weatherization has been strong and should continue. I think we should keep our schools so we don't need to more transportation in that arena, and I think we should update aging municipal infrastructure to stop sewage overflows. Getting away from just climate, but going generally into environmental issues. We also, we need to do our part. Oops, I went too long. I'll stop, sorry.
Thank you very much. The question goes to Archie Flower.
Thank you, Don. Very frankly, the renewable energy sector is like a Band-Aid on a gushing artery. I'm not against wind, I'm not against solar. I really enjoy the idea of solar thermal, which is basically mirrors heating a liquid and generating power that way. But the plain truth is there's only one energy source that we already have in hand that can replace fossil fuels and replace it in their entirety, and that's nuclear energy. Liquid fluoride thorium reactors can actually allow us to close the carbon cycle so that we can generate our own synthetic hydrocarbon fuels, which basically sequesters the carbon we've already put in to the atmosphere and into the ocean, which we can't forget. It's already a proven safe technology, and we really need to start using it.
Thank you very much. Jon Christiano.
Yes, thank you. I think the GWSA in particular is an extremely unaffordable model for Vermont. Renewables are difficult. They're not dependable, as evidenced by some of the rolling blackouts in California. But Vermont doesn't believe what's going on there. We're going to chart our own course to our detriment. I'm a non-believer in the reduction of CO2 as part of a natural earth cycle. Carbon dioxide is required for crop proliferation. It's got a minuscule amount of the atmospheric content, less than 1%. And when we're talking about renewables in our electric cars, how do we dispose of the batteries, and where is the power generated to run those cars and charge the batteries?
Thank you. Chris Bray.
So let me start unequivocally that although COVID is a clear and present danger everyone feels every day, climate change dwarfs the risk to all of us over time in terms of the devastating kinds of things that are happening to the world, the natural world we depend on. I would, if I'm returned to Montpelier, I really want to double down on what we already know and have learned through our Efficiency Vermont programs. And so to use the work we've already done in creating the renewable energy standard for Vermont. Vermont's grid is the cleanest energy in the United States, 63% renewable, whether you try whether you're thinking you're participating or not. So what is the point of having this clean grid? It is to then use clean electricity to heat our homes and power our vehicles. There's a huge opportunity there, and we know how to do this. We need to create the program that moves it forward.
Thank you very much. This question goes to Peter Briggs.
The private sector will be the one who finds the answer to this problem. They already are making significant strides. The private sector has moved to natural gas over a lot of other forms of fuel, and it has made a significant reduction in CO2. I can't think of any technology that is credited to being discovered or invented from a legislative body, and even less from a court session or court case. Making a bunch of lawyers wealthy through endlessly dragging court cases around and around in the courts, I don't see as being productive. It's going to be a parasite on the resources we're going to need to find technology to do this. And I also like to point out that nobody seems to be considering the billions of kilowatts of energy that is shipped every day through pipelines and in tanker trucks. If you're going to ship all of that over the grid, you're going to have a much different grid than we have today. And I don't see anybody talking about that when they talk about the future being all electric.
Thank you very much. And the final candidate to answer this question is Ruth Hardy.
Thank you. As always, much of what I've wanted to say has been covered by my legislative colleagues. I will add, as a member of the Senate Agriculture Committee, we did a lot of work on looking at ecosystem services and the work that farmers do in rebuilding soil and producing local foods. So that would certainly be on my list, is supporting diversified regenerative agriculture and keeping land in farming in order to sequester carbon. And in addition, forests, as Representative Sheldon said, doing everything we can to protect our forests and prevent forest fragmentation so that trees can do the work that they're really good at sequestering and storing carbon. One of the benefits of COVID has been that fewer people have been driving. So remote working can be another way to reduce transportation emissions. And public transportation, I don't think has been mentioned, but those of us in Middlebury have seen a public train come to our town just recently, and I would like to give a shout out to public transportation as an option as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's the end of the forum questions. So moving on to the additional questions.
Don?
Yes, sorry.
I don't
rebuttal.
Yeah, I guess rebuttal sounds strong. I just want to add use that card or whatever it is to
All right.
add a note. And that is on Global Warming Solutions Act. When people talk about a right of action, they usually say lawsuits. And, that's a word that probably gets most people's hackles up. But really what it is it's an opportunity for a citizen to go before a judge and say, I'm not sure the government is following the law. Could you please look at this? So that's why we have that neutral third branch of government. That's all the citizen right is. You can't make money doing this. You can simply hold a government accountable to fulfilling the law.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, without further ado, so the questions we've received via Q&A regard early childhood education and childcare, and have already been addressed by the candidates early in the forum. So we're going to use a question submitted by a local resident through our community survey. And the question is this: if the scientific community indicates that the COVID-19 vaccine is safe, would you advise your constituents to get the vaccine if they are physically able to do so? And the first candidate who will answer this question is Ruth Hardy.
Thank you. If the scientific and public health community and the medical community agrees that the vaccine is safe and that it is effective and it has gone through the clinical trials that are necessary, yes, absolutely, I would advise my constituents to get the vaccination. We have seen the devastating effects of this pandemic, and it's really important that in particular we are able to protect the most vulnerable people in our society. Again, I would emphasize that I would want to make sure that the vaccine is safe and effective, and that it first be provided to the people who need it the most. And then, yes, I would absolutely advise my constituents to be vaccinated against the COVID virus. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Chris Bray.
So I'll follow up on what Senator Hardy was just saying. I think we've seen some worrisome interference at the federal level and political interference with public health and the public health system. So, and the operation of the FDA. So as Senator Hardy was saying, I would first want to ensure that we had the most rigorous and traditional vetting of any kind of vaccine brought to the public. But once properly vetted, I would encourage people to get the vaccine. We know that the virus can be deadly, so there's a huge benefit. I would also just want to remind people that right now is the time to be considering getting your regular flu shot. Because if you're down with the flu, it makes you more susceptible to the kind of assault that COVID would be layered on top of it. So I would encourage people, flu season is already starting and shots are widely available.
Thank you for your answer. Peter Briggs.
I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I like to take them case by case, and the COVID vaccine would be one in which I would not support mandating everybody get it. I wouldn't encourage people either. I'd tell them, make your own decision. I'm young, I'm healthier probably than most anybody else my age, or maybe a few others, and I don't get around many people, so personally I wouldn't be taking it. I have concerns about it being new, and do we really know what the long-term effects are? It hasn't been around a long time, like vaccines against polio and syphilis and chicken pox and things like that.
Okay, thank you. Jon Christiano.
Okay, thank you. I'm not against vaccines. I had polio vaccine when I was a kid. When I was in the military, I even had one for Black Death, the plague, when I was sent to Turkey. So yeah, I'm not against that sort of thing, but I'm not convinced that this is a good idea. It would take a lot to convince me, a lot of data that it is safe, that it's been properly vetted, and I'd like to see a lot of the people that are developing it try it out first before they get to me. I'm not young like Mr. Briggs. I'm an old guy. I'm pretty healthy, and I don't tend to take it either because I think I don't get flu shots either, because every time I got the flu or I got a flu shot, guess what? I got the flu. Otherwise, it was a 50-50 chance, and I'm going with the same roundup this time as well.
Thank you very much. Archie Flower.
One of the most amazing tools that we have to explore this world we're in is science. And scientists really are able to do some amazing things. And even with this novel virus, they're still learning a huge amount every day. If they come out with a properly vetted vaccine that has gone through the trials and the rigorous double-blind testing, I think that people should seriously consider that. They should definitely consider it with consultation with their physician, and they should also look at the rest of their life context. Peter Briggs is young. He doesn't hang around a lot of people. He doesn't necessarily need it, but others are older and may have more exposure and may definitely need it. So definitely, talk to your physician is what I would say.
Thank you very much. The question goes to Peter Conlon.
I'll back that up and say I hope that my constituents aren't looking to me to give them medical advice. But that being said, I think it's a safe, effective vaccine. Like any vaccine that's safe and effective, I would encourage people to investigate it and consider it very, very strongly.
Okay, thank you. And now Robin Scheu.
Yes, hi, thank you. As others have said, vaccines are really, I see taking vaccines as a public health issue. And normally vaccines are thoroughly vetted, go through all the trials, they take some time. The fastest vaccine we've brought to the public was the mumps vaccine, and that took 4 years. Hopefully we have better systems and science in place and can make this happen a little bit faster. But if it truly is vetted and goes through all the trials that need to be done, I would not hesitate to encourage people, obviously on the advice of their doctor. But we need to protect people who are immunocompromised and can't take the vaccine and might get sick. We are protecting other people, it's not just about us. It's the people that are around us. And I think that we have some sort of a moral obligation to think about beyond ourselves to the larger community. So I would be encouraging it.
Thank you very much. Amy Sheldon.
I'm not sure I have too much to add. Everyone's been very articulate on this. I do think that it's best to get your medical advice from your doctor, and it's a personal decision. So I don't usually advise my constituents on medical. But I do, obviously, if it's an efficacious vaccine that's well vetted and it's proven to be effective, it seems like it would be worth talking over with your doctor.
And finally, the question goes to Ruth Shattuck Bernstein.
My answer is basically yes, and what everybody else has said. Consult with your doctor, but I would prioritize making it accessible so people would know how to get it and where to get it, and not have to just sign up online. And yeah, that's my answer.
Okay, thank you very much. All right. I believe we have one more question. One of our audience members submitted comments via Q&A related to affordable housing. And so we have crafted those comments into a question. What are some creative, non-traditional ideas for increasing the stock of affordable housing in Addison County? And the question goes first to Peter Conlon.
That doesn't even give me a chance to think. Affordable housing is very challenging. With our septic regulations that we have, the simple basic cost of construction, it is hard to really create anything that we would qualify as affordable. That being said, I think we need to look at what other areas have done in terms of zoning that allows for in-law apartments, tiny houses, other alternatives to traditional housing, as traditional housing continues to get more and more expensive simply to create. So I think we need to look at other models, experiment with them, and see what we can come up with. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy Sheldon.
Thanks. There was a housing bill that came through at the end of the session that did look to mandating increasing density in our downtowns and areas. So I think this is going to be a topic that we will take up in the next biennium for sure. What we've done so far is to increase density through having mother-in-law apartments be available where housing was already happening. And I know the questioner, it looks like, brought up tiny houses. I think looking to how we could get tiny houses or starter homes going. I know in certain states where housing is more affordable, communities actually pay for the extension of the infrastructure. I think there are more creative things that we could be doing to look to reduce the costs of housing, particularly in places where we have services and we want to see people living close to town.
Thank you very much. Ruth Shattuck Bernstein.
I think this is hugely important. I don't have a specific plan. As I've said, we've built 4 in Shoreham, and 2 of them are in the town center, and we're thinking about another one, but we would like to know whether there's going to be a school or not in order to make that decision. And it's been a huge help to have the infrastructure, the town water and wastewater in town. really kept the costs down. Shoreham also has the Farnham property, which is 300 acres, not all developable, but some of it is near the town center, that they've received a grant to look into affordable or mixed use, affordable housing or mixed use. So I hope that we can encourage and develop that. When we've put a house up for rent, my phone rings off the hook. When we put it up for sale, they sell pretty fast, but it is harder for people to buy. So we need to help encourage that.
Thank you. Robin Scheu.
Yes, hi, I had written down a list and then people started using all the things on my list. So tiny houses was the first thing I thought of as well. Also old schools. We have schools that maybe aren't being used or could not be used and could be repurposed. Are there other kinds of buildings that we could repurpose? In Bristol, after Autumn Harp left and Kevin Harper did Bristol Works, he also had a plan for a mixed age, multi-use housing complex around Bristol Works. And there was a lot of interest in that. I'm not sure where it stands now because I'm not doing that work, but those kinds of creative solutions I think are great. We've talked a little bit about looking at zoning, accessory dwellings. Can we do more multifamily share housing? Certainly in places like Springfield, Vermont, there's old stock and it needs badly to be refurbished so that it can be livable. So there's a lot of things that we can do.
Okay, thank you very much. Chris Bray.
Thanks. So I want to follow up on something Robin just mentioned, actually. So over here, I live in Bristol. There was a large bond proposed for renovating Mount Abe, and it has failed a number of times. I've talked with a bunch of people about reconceptualizing the middle school, high school from just a school to a community center. And that would include affordable housing, community kitchen, early childcare, and so that it becomes a place where people of all ages use a campus that they share together. And you end up with some economies of scale by bringing people together that way, as well as richer lives, really, by bringing younger and older people together in a location that we already own the property. And there's an opportunity to fund that project, not just for students, but also for the community as a whole, including housing.
Okay, thank you very much. Jon Christiano.
Okay, I think part of the answer to this question, other people have mentioned as well, is the density of the population base. I think it's important to increase the density, but we need to follow the infrastructure, which is often in rural Vermont a problem. And the centers on transportation, water, sewer, schools, access to schools, fire protection. Those are all things that would affect density, but also tax incentives for owner builders to make it more attractive to them to put up new stock or to refurbish old existing.
Okay, thank you very much. The question goes to Ruth Hardy.
Thank you. One of the side results of the COVID crisis is that here in Vermont, we actually proved that we can house everyone if we put our minds to it and if we invest in the ability to do so. In the early stages of the crisis, we found a place to live for everyone who had been in shelters in order to make sure that they were safe from infection from the virus. And then we invested $85 million from our Corona relief funds into housing. And that covered a huge spectrum of housing for people at risk of homelessness, rental assistance, stable housing for families, recovery housing, and also investing in the actual infrastructure of housing itself. So I think we need to be building from that. And some of the housing that we need to create is supportive housing that has social services, mental health, substance use services for people who need it, and also housing for our elders with services for elderly population. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter Briggs.
Since the 90s, the housing market has been going into a bubble. And in 2008, that bubble tried to pop. the central bank came in and pumped it back up. And so the rule is that bubbles don't last forever. So I do believe my generation will get a chance eventually to have an opportunity to buy homes at fair market value and not an overinflated value like they are currently. Whether or not the economy melts up or melts down is yet to be seen. Of course, it's also going to be critical on whether or not you've invested in assets that will hold the value through an inflation should we melt up. But I do believe eventually the economy will right itself. As far as government handing out more subsidies, well, that's kind of more of the same thing of what the central bank is doing with easy mortgages and very low interest rates. That has been a big driver in driving up the cost of housing.
Okay, thank you for your answer. And so the final candidate to answer this final question of the evening will be Archie Flower.
Thank you, Don. I was just speaking about homelessness to my best friend the other day and remarking that that single word actually is very telling about us as a society, precisely because housing is an overabundantly solved technology. We really have so many ways to build houses that we have no excuse for having people that don't have houses. That's absolutely horrible to have to contemplate, and it's entirely created by our own systems. In terms of non-traditional housing, 3D printed houses or monolithic domes are really inexpensive, super energy efficient, and they're going to last, pretty much forever. So I think we should definitely let the market open up to those possibilities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that concludes the question and answer session. So now we'll invite the candidates to make their closing statements. With time permitting, we can add 30 seconds to each candidate's allotment, giving them a minute and 30 seconds to make their closing statement, should they choose. And we will do this in reverse alphabetical order this time. So we will be starting with Amy Sheldon.
Thank you. The pandemic has shined a bright light on the inequities in our society, as well as demonstrated our ability to change quickly when necessary. From access to public education and affordable health care to recognizing who really is an essential worker and paying them a fair wage, it's more clear than ever that we need to continue to work on affordable, quality health care, equal access to good education, and protecting our environment. I look forward to continuing my work with Vermonters on these pressing issues. I want to thank the Addison County Economic Development Corporation, the Addison County Chamber, and the Addison County Independent for holding this forum, and to thank those of you who took the time to attend. It is my honor and great privilege to represent Middlebury in the Vermont legislature, and I hope I can count on the votes of Middlebury residents to send me back for another term. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And for closing arguments, we turn to Ruth Shattuck Bernstein.
All right. I guess in closing, I want to emphasize what being a representative would mean to me, as well as countering the divisiveness we're experiencing. I've always valued and loved learning about others' lives, experiences, businesses, etc. And I've made a hobby kind of getting the word out. The town library and town school often ask me to publicize things they're having trouble because we have so many times we have awesome things happening, but people don't know. So I think both of these passions would serve me very well, and I could further develop them should I have the honor of serving in this way. I would also formally, as well as informally, get out into my communities, attending select board meetings, events, when we can have them, holding regular coffee hours, etc. So constituents can have a voice and so I can share to them what is going on in Montpelier. I would work to educate both grown-ups and children about voting, about our state government system. A lot of people don't know who their representative is, how the government affects their lives. So that would be very important to me. I'm also very upset by the hatred and vitriol we see all around us, the demonizing of people that are different from ourselves. I see myself as a Democrat with a strong, independent, green Vermont streak, and I want to stand for everyone and do everything I can to contribute to understanding, collaborating, working together, and dialing down the adversarialism.
Thank you very much. Robin Scheu.
Thank you. And thank you all for hosting this forum tonight and the two that you are doing over the next couple of weeks. The coronavirus pandemic has laid bare the fragility and brokenness of so many of our systems, from racial inequity to the lack of paid family and medical leave, the critical need for childcare so parents can go to work, the ever-rising costs of healthcare, food insecurity, lack of housing. The unfairness of our systems is staggering, and the climate crisis hovers over all of this. I want a Vermont and an economy that works for all of us, not just a select few. A Vermont where our families and communities can thrive and where the Vermont dream is accessible to everyone, not just a few people. Every Vermonter should have the opportunity to earn a livable wage, receive high quality, affordable health care, get a great education, and live in a clean, healthy environment and retire with security. As your representative in Middlebury, I will continue to fight to ensure that all Vermonters get a fair shot, contribute their fair share, and play by the same set of rules. I hope that I have earned your vote for another term in Montpelier. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Peter Conlon.
Thanks, and thank you for providing a candidate forum that is clearly a breath of fresh air compared with what we've seen, especially last night. And I want to thank you for putting this on, and I want to thank my fellow candidates for being here. It's great as a representative to hear other people's views and to hear other people's ideas, and it's a great benefit. And I think it's really too bad that we are missing a few of the candidates from these various House and Senate districts that are represented tonight. You know, Vermont's doing really well right now compared to other states, but we face an uphill climb, especially as we prepare for federal dollars running out and the longer term impacts of the pandemic on the national economy. Vermonters are going to need a government to help play a major role in the recovery as we continue to do this. And I just hope that I can continue to bring a thoughtful and common sense approach to address these challenges. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. The next closing statement will be made by Ruth Hardy.
Thank you, and thanks as always to the Chamber and to everybody who worked to make this candidate forum possible. I wish it could be in person. I'm really missing the interaction between the candidates. As your state senator, I have worked hard to be as accessible and responsive as I can. Throughout the COVID crisis, I've written regular updates about the virus, state resources, and community stories. I've helped hundreds of constituents access vital benefits and services. I have listened to many constituents to better understand their perspectives and needs. I've been a strong advocate for Addison County, ensuring you have a voice and a seat at the table. I look forward to continuing my work next session, tackling issues that we couldn't fully address during this crisis-driven session, including climate change, criminal justice reform, racial justice, access to college, school finances, and healthcare. I also want to ensure we act on the lessons we learned from this pandemic, and there are many. The next several years of recovery will be difficult for our state and country, so we must have collaborative, compassionate leaders with the experience and skills necessary to move us forward. It has been an honor to represent you in the Vermont State Senate. My name is Ruth Hardy, and I again ask for your trust and your vote this fall. Thank you.
Thank you. Archie Flower.
Thank you very much, Don, for moderating. Thank you to all of our sponsors, and thank you to the audience for involving yourself in this process and giving us your time and your attention, because right now our country really needs people to pay attention. I think that there are two fundamental modes of organizing society. There's centralization and decentralization. Libertarianism is about creating a consent culture where people are decentralized. They have the ability and the authority to run their own lives because that is their natural right. And the reason I believe in this type of mode of organizing society is I trust my neighbors. I trust Vermonters. And just as a very interesting story, this is real Vermont, where I had a flat tire yesterday and I was trying to change it, and I failed, the jack broke, and out of the blue, someone came up and he was an actual mechanic and he's like, hey, I got it. I'm gonna go grab my jack. No worries. You know, that's the Vermont attitude, neighbor to neighbor, helping each other out. And I think that's what we just need to strive for.
Thank you very much. Jon Christiano.
Thank you. If elected, I don't disillusion myself any. There's a great deal to learn. But my predecessors accomplished this task. They're both one-term valuable terms, but nevertheless one-term senators. I believe I can transition that as well. I believe my position would be more balanced with an emphasis on reduction of expense versus cost, and as opposed to raising taxes. A vote for me is a vote for change. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the closing argument or closing statement will be made by Chris Bray.
Thank you to our hosts and to everyone watching at home and to my fellow candidates. Democracy thrives with participation. In my time in office, I've had literally tens of thousands of communications with you all. Some in person, some on the phone, some by email. And I appreciate each and every one of those conversations because from you all, I've learned a great deal about the issues, about you, about the ways you think and feel about what we're doing in Vermont and what could be improved. If you want to represent people, you need to know what's on their minds. And that's why I put so much effort into staying in touch, year in, year out, and working year round as your legislator, not just during the session. And I know that you all, we want a stronger economy, not just any economy, but one that plays to our unique strengths here in Addison County and Vermont more generally. That's why I've spent a decade building farm to plate, rebuilding and expanding our food economy. That's why I've been a champion of our clean energy economy, which today provides jobs for over 18,000 Vermonters, including solar workers whose average wage is $27 an hour, a true living wage. And that's why I've worked so hard on clean water, because it's both essential to healthy living, our tourism industry, and being able to get out and enjoy our lakes and rivers. There's an old expression, well begun is half done. Well, the programs I've just cited are well begun, and there's more, much more that we can do for ourselves in the worlds of farming, food, forestry, clean energy, and clean water. I would like to continue that work. I ask for your continued support and your vote this election. Thank you.
Okay, it appears I may have skipped a candidate. Is that right, sir? So I apologize. I skipped accidentally, and in the last part of my job of the evening, and I messed that up. So I apologize to Peter Briggs, who will now make his closing statement.
Well, thank you for hosting this forum. I'm a millennial, so I spend a lot of time around electronics, but perhaps unlike most millennials, my time spent on with electronics is spent trying to learn. Usually while I'm working, I'm listening to an audiobook or I'm streaming YouTube videos. You may have noticed tonight I have some different ideas from everybody else. A big reason for those different ideas is tapping into the world library of knowledge through the internet. That's something I believe I can take to Montpelier, some very different ideas to solve problems that haven't been solved by the same old ideas. Also, I'm an average guy, so I know what hurts us who is average people, and I'll find answers to solve it. I have a never-ending passion for learning because I do believe it's the best way to live your life. So if you would like different opinions in Montpelier, I'd appreciate your vote.
Okay, thank you very much, and thanks to all the candidates. And I believe I will be turning things over now to Fred Kenny.
Good evening. I'm Fred Kenny, Executive Director of the Addison County Economic Development Corporation. So this concludes the 2020 Addison County Legislative Candidate Forum for the Middlebury area, brought to you in partnership with the Addison County Chamber of Commerce. I'd like to again thank our media sponsor, the Addison Independent, as well as the candidates and all the local residents that joined us. Thanks also to our moderator, Don Devost, did a superb job. By the end of this week, the recording of this forum will be available on the Chamber of Commerce website, www.addisoncounty.com, and also on the ACEDC website, addisoncountyedc.org. And in the near future on the Middlebury community, it'll be available on the Middlebury Community Television channel. If you'd like to attend our legislative forums for Bristol and Virgins, you can sign up on the Chamber's website to do that. Thanks again, and thanks to everybody for keeping us on time tonight. Right on the dot at 8 o'clock. Have a good night.